shocker that the people who see everything through the lens of race and sex see their election loss as a result of racism and sexism.
Believe that racism and misogyny, they're just alive and well.
But that's not, it doesn't say I'm white, I voted for Donald Trump because of racism. That's not what
Things got wild on The View as Bill Maher stirred the pot with a hard-hitting reality check that left the panel reeling. Sunny Hostin stood her ground, locking horns with her fellow co-hosts in a fiery exchange that had Whoopi Goldberg jumping in to calm the storm before it went completely off the rails. With election fallout still looming, the tension in the room was already thick, and Maher's sharp critique only added fuel to the fire. He didn't hold back, taking aim at the left's obsession with identity politics and their refusal to acknowledge what went wrong at the polls. His unfiltered remarks lit the fuse that sent the conversation into full-blown meltdown. The panel's attempt to reshape the political narrative quickly turned into a no-holds-barred clash, the voices rising and frustration boiling over. As things hit a boiling point, the big question now is, will cooler heads prevail, or are we on the verge of an even bigger showdown? Strap in. This explosive moment might just be the start of something even more intense. Let's break it all down.
On the far left, that the saying is, when you're in a hole, stop digging, not keep digging. Talk about doubling down on what got you fucked in the first place. Even the one concession I've heard a few people on the losing side offer, that liberals should stop saying the Trump voters are stupid, comes with a kind of unspoken parentheses. We know they are stupid, just don't say it. Yeah, I got bad news for you. They don't have a monopoly.
Let's be honest. Bill Maher nailed it. No argument necessary. The question now is, when will the message finally sink in? The left keeps pointing fingers at identity politics for their election setbacks, but then turns around and accuses Republicans of weaponizing the very same thing. The back and forth is dizzying, and the contradictions are hard to ignore. And while we're at it, even if we give Whoopi the benefit of the doubt on Kamala Harris having some kind of master plan, the real issue isn't the lack of ideas, it's the lack of follow-through. As vice president, Harris has had plenty of opportunities to deliver. So has Joe Biden. The promises were big, but the results, not so much. So here's the real question voters are asking. Why take another chance on leaders who've already had the power to make real change, but didn't? That's the heart of the matter.
For people to believe that racism and misogyny, they're just alive and well. I think that we don't want to think that about ourselves, our neighbors, our friends, but it's my lived experience tells me that it does still exist, even if your lived experience doesn't tell you that it exists. And the facts support that. I think we have a graph. If you look at there's a clear racial.
Let's clear the air. This isn't some inconvenient truth. It's just a shaky argument that doesn't hold up when you actually look at the facts. Breaking voters down by race or education might offer surface-level insights, but it doesn't tell the full story of why elections swing the way they do. Take a look at the numbers. Joe Biden's 2020 campaign outperformed Kamala Harris by a wide margin. That alone makes it clear this isn't just about identity. It's about leadership, trust, and delivering real results. At the end of the day, voters weren't moved by labels or political catchphrases. They were looking for concrete solutions in a time of real crisis. Any storyline that overlooks that truth is on borrowed time. Sooner or later, it's going to collapse under its own weight.
Life and ability to provide for their family,
Well,
whether we agree or not with Donald Trump's plans.
Black people
they thought that he was
one of the poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny, you're missing it. Most of my family, a lot of my family doesn't have college degrees.
But the stats are the stats.
But that's not, it doesn't say I'm white, I voted for Donald Trump because of racism. That's not, let me just ask. What stat are you talking? Let me just dissect. Yes, you can.
Hold on.
Take a deep breath, because we've heard this song before. They can keep rehashing the election results all day long, but it's just the same arguments on repeat. Sunny Hostin, for one, is firmly planted in her belief that sexism and misogyny are the only reasons behind the outcome. But let's be real. She's not there to have an open debate. She's there to reinforce her own narrative. No amount of facts or reasoning is going to shift her stance. Now, for those willing to look at things with a little common sense, the real story was crystal clear. The economy and immigration were the defining issues of this election, plain and simple. Democrats didn't lose because of some sweeping cultural bias. They lost because they completely misjudged what mattered most to their own voters. They brushed off red flags, ignored growing frustration, and failed to act when it mattered most. In the end, voters responded, not to spin, but to substance. Because elections aren't won with narratives alone. They're won with results. And that's exactly where the party came up short.
Through the lens of racism and sexism. Not everything. But if you're not seeing racism and sexism in America, then you need to clean your lenses.
Yeah.
Because, this is something that I also find interesting, that when Democrats and liberals talk about race or sexism, it's immediately labeled as identity politics, which has a negative connotation. It's a term that Republicans have coined, and it's been very effective. But when Donald Trump goes to Miami and talks to Cubans, that's not identity politics. When Donald Trump goes to Dearborn, Michigan and promises Arabs something, that's not identity politics.
Republicans reach out to diverse communities. It often feels more authentic, less like a PR stunt, and more like real engagement. Why? Because it's rooted in direct outreach, not a checklist of performative buzzwords. It's simple. Meet people where they are, hear what they're saying, and build real connections. That's exactly what made Trump stand out. He came across as someone willing to speak to everyone, not just one group. Now contrast that with Kamala Harris. Her campaign struggles weren't just about optics. Between unclear messaging, frequent contradictions, and her link to a struggling administration, she became an easy target. Instead of blaming outside forces, maybe it's time for Democrats to look inward. Progressive ideals have pushed the party so far left, even moderate Democrats are scratching their heads. This growing disconnect is pushing voters away and drowning out the real issues people care about, like the economy, safety, and opportunity.